Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started this Halloween day. If you can't see, I am a head coach. I have my playbook on my arm and a whistle. So I had to make that known because all the kids keep asking me, what are you dressed up as? So, in case you don't know who I am, I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Tiffany Weaver, the principal at Mason Creek, and I'm excited that you guys have joined us live if you are, and if not, you're watching this recording. I appreciate that. So, I have three amazing Mason Creek math teachers with me today. For sixth grade, we have Kendra Dobbs, seventh grade, Jennifer Scruggs, and eighth grade, we have Kelly Crow. And Miss Crow is actually also our math department chair. And so I've asked them to join me today as this is their area of expertise. And we know that the older your student gets, the higher in the grade. Sometimes the math is a little stressful when you get home. And we want to provide a little bit more information about each grade level and the standards that your students are seeing every day at Mason Creek. If you didn't know, math actually had adopted new standards in the state of Georgia, all of the state last school year. And so this is year 2 on our new math standards. And so today's purpose, we're really just going to be going over and highlighting some of the areas that students will find very applicable to their lives. And we know that's important for them to connect and find engaging in the classroom, especially with math. And any kind of transition information, because I know a lot of you, I can see, are sixth grade parents, and you may have questions about the difference between elementary math and middle school math. And then also, if you have an eighth grade student, you're maybe interested in that transition to high school from our eighth grade math classroom. So we're going to get started. We're going to kind of go in order of the grade. And so we're going to start with sixth grade. So each of the grade levels, they're going to kind of go over the domains or the big overarching themes in those grade levels. And then they'll kind of go over what is the expectation of your student in that classroom. So I'm going to let Miss Dobbs get started. And again, this is sixth grade math.
So good afternoon. So these are the three main overarching topics that we work on. And it looks like, oh, this isn't very much stuff. But actually each one of these subsections is about a unit itself, if that makes sense. So this is definitely enough. It does carry us well right up into GMAS. So some of the numerical reasoning, it is our biggest area. We've already done a couple units in that. Some of the things, we're just finishing up our unit on statistics. And so one of the big things that we've been focusing on is showing kids how we calculate their grade point average, how grades are weighted. There's 3 categories: supportive, summative, formative. And so it's kind of an aha moment when they realize, oh, I can't just do well on this one assignment. I have to do well on, in every area to make the composite grade. We've already done unit rates. And so we kind of try to show them how, at the grocery store, when you're making a purchase, not just because it's the lowest price, it may not always be the best deal. And so we talk about unit price and how to, and even I got pictures when I went grocery shopping to show them, the little unit prices at the top, usually at the top right, and how that's what you look at to see if you're actually getting the best deal. So that's numerical reasoning. And then patterns and algebraic thinking. So that's a kind of a big transition for students coming from elementary, because they don't really do a lot of using variables and things like that. And so that's kind of the first time, they've seen variables in elementary school, but they're explicitly responsible for it and starting in sixth grade, if that makes sense. And so they learn how to, write expressions and equations and inequalities, different things like that. We're going to work graphing and polygons, all kinds of different stuff. And then geometry, which was actually our first unit. So we've already taught all the geometry standards, but definitely are coming back to them. It's a kind of a basic level in elementary. They have to know shapes, angles, sides, that type of thing. And then they do basic area, a little bit of volume, perimeter. And then when sixth grade, they actually, they transition into using the new formula, base times height. And so that's a little bit of an adjustment for them because they're always used to length times width. And so we talk about why, it's base and not base times height now. And that helps them as they move on into 7th and 8th grade geometry, and things like that. So I think that was pretty much all I was going to say.
Thank you, Ms. Dobbs. One thing I'll add, just because I have an elementary age child, so I kind of see what she's doing in 4th grade versus what our 6th grade students are doing. And one thing that we emphasize in 6th grade, because it's really the first time they'll ever get to use a calculator.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yes.
So in elementary school, they're really going over math facts, trying to get them to know multiplication tables and to be able to quickly answer any question that is related to adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and all of that. But in 6th grade, they get to use a calculator on the state test and really any unit, any question. And so we're really teaching them heavily in 6th grade how to use a calculator.
Definitely. I forgot to mention that. It's always a shock. Like the first couple of days of school because we use a digital version called a Desmos calculator. And when we show it to them, they're like, it's funny because they keep asking, can I use it today? Can I use it on this assignment? Yes, I want you to use it like all the time, guys. And so by this time of year, they're doing pretty well with it, but it definitely is a big happy shock to them for sure. So.
All right, moving on to 7th grade, you're going to see some of the same domains. They kind of grow from grade level to grade level, but there is one additional one. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Scruggs, one of our 7th grade math teachers.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as you can see, those are the 4 overarching domains: patterns in algebraic reasoning, numerical reasoning, probability reasoning, geometric and spatial reasoning. And you see the largest one in pink. That's taking up the majority of our screen, and rightly so, because out of approximately 58 questions on GMAS, 28 come from this domain, okay? So the first 9 weeks, we address content in a standard known as 7-point PAR 0.4. And this may sound like Greek, but you can do a Google search and look at these standards and have access to these standards yourself. All right, so what we did in layman's terms is we looked at proportional relationships and different ways to represent them, like tables and graphs and equations. And just 16 points out of the 58 came from this standard. So we are really not done with patterns in algebraic reasoning. We have more standards to cover with that. Okay, there's another standard that has 2 learning objectives. 7-point PAR 0.4.2. It's got rules about how numbers and expressions can interact with each other. So for example, what's the rule that lets me know 2 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 2? But of course, on a more challenging scale. So remember, folks, when you had to add those x's in school, you had 2x plus 3x plus 5x. Well, how do you know that's the same as something like 5x plus 2x plus 3x? Okay. And we also look at authentic situations with equations and inequalities in another standard in the patterns in algebraic reasoning, that standard 7-point PAR 0.3. That's got 2 learning objectives. Numerical reasoning is where we are right now. And so as you can read on the screen as to what the content idea entails, that's only one content standard, but y'all, that's got 11 learning objectives in it. And 12 points of GMAS are related to this content idea. Moving on to probability reasoning. It looks at things like this. Out of a random sample, what is the probability that I will select a student that is above 5 feet tall? Among other things that are related to probability. That's just scratching the surface, because there are 6 learning objectives in this content area of probability reasoning. Okay. And about 9 points of GMAS are dedicated to probability reasoning. Lastly, we've got geometric and spatial reasoning. Okay, and this content idea pertains to measurements related to angles, circles, surface area, volume of 3D shapes. And there are 8 learning objectives with geometric and spatial reasoning. related to this content area. And about 9 points on GMAS are related to these geometric ideas. Were there any questions about any of those domains?
I think that was perfect because, we're going to just parents, so we're going to circle back in just a couple of minutes about based on the state assessment and their mastery of the standards, where would they land? What's the expectation if they're a level 1, 2, 3, and 4? So we'll circle back to 7th grade in just a moment. So let's move to 8th grade with Miss Crow. You can see, again, similar domains. They also have an additional one you'll see. Miss Crow?
Good afternoon. So with 8th grade, we build on numerical reasoning, PAR, which is patterns and algebraic reasoning, and then our geometry standards. We build from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade. Functional and graphical reasoning starts in 8th grade because we're taking all of these things that they've been learning and we're applying essentially functionality to them. A real world example that the kids have, they love this example, and that's kind of how we start functions is, can one package be delivered to 2 different houses? And the answer is no, that doesn't function appropriately. And that really gets them thinking about like how a relationship applies to a function. So we're taking this unit rate that they learned in 6th grade, this proportionality that they learned in 7th grade, and then we're adding like non-proportionality. So an old school question that comes up a lot is like comparing cell phone plans, which now they're like, what? But it's really funny to get them talking about that. And then the fair is at our place right now. So that's always a good one. It costs money to get in, and then you have to pay per ticket. Well, is this fair more expensive than this fair? Just those kind of things. Whereas linear functions essentially is not necessarily, you're not going to go graph this linear function in your everyday life, but knowing how much you're going to spend at this place or this place does come into, play almost every day. The numerical reasoning, we're talking about rational and irrational numbers. It gets them thinking about perfect squares and perfect cubes, kind of playing on their geometry standard for that, but involving just that basic, Dr. Weaver was talking about in elementary school, they're learning their multiplication facts and things like that. Well, in 8th grade, we start learning our perfect squares, just become more efficient. The biggest thing about 8th grade is that we introduce a graphing calculator. We use the Desmos graphing calculator. So the Desmos scientific calculator is available for 6th and 7th graders. And then in 8th grade, we get the scientific calculator and the graphing calculator. And then they can start visualizing all of these things that we've been putting together. Interpreting relation or expressions, equations, and inequalities. So we start taking these verbal descriptions and putting them into algebraic problems and solving them. So they can see how, if these shoes cost this amount and this is the sales tax, taking that and writing an equation for it and solving it. I already spoke on proportional and non-proportional relationships. The functional and graphical reasoning. The biggest thing here is evaluating and comparing things. So like I said, the cell phone plans, comparing those relationships of each other, or comparing this table and this graph, or this equation and this, it could be a set of ordered pairs. Then we solve systems of equations. So that's just 2 or more equations at one time. The graphing calculator really comes into play there because of the visualization. We do a volume of a sphere, a cone, and a cylinder. And we talk about pi, Pythagorean theorem, and things like that. Geometry is the smallest section on the 8th grade math test. Our focus is preparing them for Algebra 1, which would be functions, graphing, and those patterns that we see in math. And then I guess I can just go ahead and talk about Algebra 1.
Yes. There you go.
Okay, so I do teach the enhanced algebra class as well. In a regular 8th grade class, we're focusing on those things to make sure that they're prepared and ready for 9th grade. And then in the enhanced class, I'm teaching 8th grade math and 9th grade math standards at the same time. So it's everything that I just talked about, and then maybe 1 or 2 more standards that are added in. So in that first part, the linear relationships, we teach arithmetic sequences. That's the only algebra standard that's in that unit 1. And then in unit 2, when we're talking about solving systems, we have to solve systems of inequalities on top of equations. And then you can see as it builds, there's for rational and irrational numbers, we're solving radicals, rationals that are not perfect. And we're doing operations with radicals. That's the only difference there. And unit 4 is all quadratic functions. So that is all an algebra standard. There are no 8th grade standards for quadratic functions or exponential functions. Those are all algebra. Data and statistics. So we do our qualitative graphs, which is an 8th grade standard. And then we add correlation coefficient and MAD, which is mean absolute deviation, and things like that into the algebra standards. And then for geometry, off the top of my head, geometric sequences, that would be the only difference between the 8th grade standard and the algebra standard. So it just takes everything they would learn in 9th grade and adds it to everything that they would learn in 8th grade at the same time.
Thank you, Ms. Crow. So some of you may have had students come through Mason Creek or another middle school, or maybe you're thinking about your own middle school experience. So a few years ago, maybe is this year 3 of enhanced, or 2? This is only second year. A few years ago, the state got rid of accelerated math classes in the middle school. So used to, they would have to take and start in the 6th grade accelerated 6th grade math /7A. So they would do all of 6th and half of 7th. And then in 7th grade, they would finish the 7th grade standards and do 8th grade math. And then in 8th grade, they would solely take algebra. And so if you didn't start in 6th grade with that accelerated coursework, then you were not eligible to take that high school credit, because the enhanced algebra course is a high school credit course. You wouldn't be able to start it midway. So the state revamped all of the standards, as I mentioned at the beginning. And one of the things that changed was the pathway for algebra. So now it's called enhanced algebra. And as Ms. Crow said, it integrates both 8th and 9th grade standards together. And so that means at the end of the year, those students in 8th grade get to take both. I know they are always very excited. They get to take both the 8th grade math state assessment, as well as they take the end of course assessment for algebra. And so when their scores come back, it is part of their grade, just like at the high school level, and they get a high school credit for our course. And we have a very, very high success rate for the end of course and the end of grade. Ms. Crow does an amazing job with that. So, so if your 6th grade student is not in advanced, if in 7th grade you're thinking we might be interested in enhanced algebra, this is something we start talking about in March and April to prepare students for that coursework in 8th grade. Okay, we're going to move on, and just real quickly, I don't know if your students ever talk about the different programs that we use, but we do have 2 main primary resources that all of the Douglas County School System uses in our classrooms. And so one of the new programs is iReady, and we use iReady. They do MyPath once a week for 30 to 49 minutes. And that is going to remediate deficit areas that they have from previous grade levels. So some of our students may be working on a 4th grade standard. They could be, if they're an 8th grade student, they could be working on something they were supposed to have learned in 6th grade but still struggle with. So we do use iReady, and that is specifically for remediation. So we took a diagnostic back in August. We'll take it again in January, and then we'll take it again in March. And that will kind of design their MyPath based on how they do on that diagnostic. Another program we use is Desmos, so that not to be confused with the Desmos calculator Ms. Dobbs mentioned. The Desmos calculator is available in Desmos, but Desmos has a curriculum that many of our teachers use. It's for all students. It has task cards. It has direct instruction that teachers can use. It has a lot of practice problems that students can work through to see if they have mastered that standard in math. So again, Desmos and iReady, if you ask your students about, they should be able to speak to both. Moving on, we've got 3 more slides, parents. So thanks for hanging in with us. So these are called achievement level descriptors, or also known as ALDs. We like to shorten stuff. So this is something that the state provides for every tested subject and grade level. So this one is the 6th grade math one, and it essentially tells us what the expectation is if a student is going to be testing at a certain level. And so if you attended our data meeting a couple weeks ago, you'll know that a beginning learner is a level 1. So that means that your student really didn't master any of the standards on that grade level. A level 2 is a developing learner, and you can kind of see the columns going across. A level 2 means that they mastered some of the standards, but not all of them, and they are going to struggle moving to the next grade level. So we don't want our students to be a 1 or a 2. So our teachers really focus on the expectations that are listed for a level 3 or a 4. A 3 means that they mastered at a proficient level the standards of that course. A distinguished learner, level 4, means that they went above and beyond, and they really understand that material. So Ms. Dobbs, Ms. Scruggs, and Ms. Crow are going to really only highlight a few things in the proficient and distinguished learner categories that are different than the beginning learner and developing, because again, we don't want our students in a level 1 or a 2 category. So Ms. Dobbs, here is 6th grade math for you.
Again, so the best way to kind of really understand this is if your child is a proficient learner, then they can do everything that a beginning learner and a developing learner can do also. And so, and like Dr. Weaver said, they can do it at a higher level. And so some of the things that really kind of stand out is they're solving, you'll see relevant problems, multi-step problems, realistic problems, comparisons, with different kinds of numbers, and stuff like that. That's really the difference between like the beginning and developing and proficient and distinguished. They can do things at a higher level. They're not just identifying the ratios and proportions and percents. They're solving problems with them. And then they can do authentic problem, like real life problem, which is what when I mentioned we already did ratios and stuff that we try to implement. So they can take it, beyond just the basic answer the question. They can, the application part of it. That's the biggest difference. I don't know. Do you want me to read all of them or?
No, that's perfect. I'm going to provide links to these, parents. So if you do want to go through them with your student, you definitely can. They're available on the Georgia Department of Ed, but I'll shoot you guys the links to these because I also know it's rather small. This is 7th grade. So you can see it's in the same format as 6th grade, starts with level 1 to level 4. So Ms. Scruggs, anything you want to highlight here?
Well, just a little. I mean, Ms. Dobbs did such an excellent job of telling the difference between a beginning learner and as it advances to a distinguished learner. So I'll just highlight, one point. So like a beginning learner, so they could take something like an inequality, x plus 3 is less than 5, and a beginning learner can solve that, and they'll get x is less than 2. A developing learner, they know what that answer means. They know that it means x can be any number less than 2, but it cannot be 2. The proficient learner, they can draw a number line. They can illustrate this solution. They know it's an open circle on positive 2. They draw an arrow to the left, and they know what possible solutions are. A distinguished learner, They can take a word problem, come up with an inequality that helps them, that illustrates the solution, and they can interpret what that means. So like they'd have a word problem. Nick has $5. He can't spend all of his money. He wants to buy a bag of Jolly Ranchers for $3, tax included. What can Nick spend without losing all of his money? And they can set up that inequality, they can solve that inequality, and they can know what that solution means.
Thank you, Ms. Scruggs. And moving on to 8th grade, our last slide, Ms. Crow.
Yeah, I'm just going to highlight kind of like what Ms. Scruggs did. A beginning learner can identify something. So here's a vocabulary word. What is it? And you'll see that when you're reading through these, that a beginning learner identify, things like that. A developing learner is one that can just do it, essentially. Okay, so just use Pythagorean theorem, just solve a 1 and 2 step and multi-step equation. And then that proficient learner is going to be able to do some constructing, movement, a little application, but then your distinguished learner, like Ms. Scruggs said, is going to be able to take this real life problem that we have and make something out of it, make a linear function. All of these authentic problems, especially Pythagorean theorem, I was looking at that one because those are the ones that they love. For 8th grade, the proficient and distinguished learner actually has different standards linked in it. So like the proficient learner can do this, this, and this, but that distinguished learner is going to be able to do, domain and range, and really that real life application of everything that the beginning learner, developing learner, proficient learner, can just solve or identify. So those keywords really help you understand, like a vocabulary quiz, that's identifying and things like that. An application type question is going to be that proficient and distinguished learner. Did you want me to do algebra? I think there's one more.
We don't have to go through this one. I think you guys can kind of get an idea of how it progresses. And like they mentioned, if you can do a level 4, that means you can do all of the items that are listed in level 1, 2, and 3. So again, we want our teachers, just so you know, our teachers look at this when they're planning lessons, when they're creating activities, and when they're writing assessments. So we want to be able to, again, targeting our students at that level 3 proficient level and higher, so that they're prepared for not only the state test, because that's not the most important thing, but what's coming up next. So we're preparing 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, and then of course 8th to 9th in high school, because high school math, they have to have 4 credits to graduate from high school. So we want them to be 100% prepared when they leave Mason Creek. That is always our goal. So thank you, teachers. I appreciate you. I'm going to quit sharing the presentation so I can see you guys. Parents, what questions do you have? You may not have any right now, but if you think of some, you can absolutely either write it in the chat or you can come off mute and ask any questions. And I saw there was one earlier about the calculator. Thank you, Ms. Dobbs. I can actually link that in our newsletter for parents so that everyone will have access to it. And so it is a free website that uses the Desmos calculator that your students use every day in their math classes. All right. Well, if you guys don't have questions and you think of one later, you can definitely ask your student's math teacher. You can shoot me an email and I will find out whatever the answer is. Again, Ms. Dobbs, Ms. Scruggs, and Ms. Crow are experts at their grade level, and they work very closely with the other math teachers, so they can definitely find out whatever the answer may be. So testing begins, it's usually the last week of April. I don't even know where my calendar is. So it's like April 28th, 29th, whatever that Monday is. And then we always start with language arts. So we'll have language arts day 1 and 2. And then math is always that 3rd day. So all 6th, 7th, and 8th take all grade levels of language arts and math. And that will be that first week. But if you look at the calendar, I don't have it in front of me, but it will be that last Monday of the last week of April. But I'll definitely put that in the parent newsletter, probably starting in January or February. All right. Well, if there's no questions, I know the teachers need to get back to their classes and to their planning. I hope you have a great Halloween. I hope everyone stays safe tonight, trick or treating. Thank you, Ms. Scruggs. Yes, the Desmos Calculator is also an app that your student can put on their phone or you can put on your phone. All right. Y'all have a great day.